Public participation is not an inconvenience in Kenya's governance framework. It's not a bureaucratic box to tick. It is a constitutional principle. Yet, increasingly, one gets the uneasy sense that those who wield power see it differently, as an obstacle to navigate, or worse, an irritation to endure. Consider the recent cooperation agreement between the national government and the Nairobi County government, a significant arrangement affecting millions of residents of the capital city. It was signed with great fanfare at State House, of all places. Only afterwards did we hear that public participation would follow. But logically, should it not be the other way around? Public participation is meant to inform decisions, not ratify them after the fact. Because if the residents of Nairobi, the people whose lives will be affected by such an agreement, were to say they do not support it, what then? Does the government unwind a deal already signed? Kenya's courts have confronted this issue many times, and their message has been unmistakable. In 2024, the High Court declared the Privatization Act 2023 unconstitutional, halting plans to privatize several state assets. The court at the time found that the law failed the test of meaningful public participation, both in its quality and its reach. In another decision, the courts made it even clearer. Public participation, they said, must be, and I quote, real and not illusory. Not a cosmetic or public relations act. Not cosmetic, not public relations, not a formality. But perhaps the deeper issue here is not necessarily procedural, perhaps it is philosophical. Because beyond the legal requirement lies a troubling pattern in the way questions from citizens are treated. Recently, during a television talk show, a host questioned the government's development record against its campaign promises. Instead of addressing the substance of the question, the response was dismissive. The host, viewers were told, simply did not know how to read the manifesto. Officials said they would teach him how to read manifestos. Yet, during that same discussion, it became clear that the specific issue being debated was not specifically mentioned in the manifesto itself. That they were doing was not clarification. It was condescending. Then there is a recent Kenya pipeline company IPO, which struggled to attract some investors. Retail investors stayed away. Foreign investors stayed away too. But the explanation offered was curious. Foreign investors, we were told, had been frightened off by Kenyans questioning the deal. Apparently, these foreign investors were not concerned with the valuation or the books or the fundamentals that investors normally examine. The problem, we were told, was that Kenyans talk too much. The minister went further, lamenting what he described as a country full of armchair experts who question everything, even primary school dropouts. It's a remarkable way for a government to speak about its own citizens. And this tone is not entirely new. Even senior advisors have sometimes responded to criticism with open disdain. On social media, one former presidential economic advisor once dismissed critics bluntly. He said, "If you're ignorant, keep quiet and learn." That posture, that assumption that those in power understand and the public does not, sits uneasily with the spirit of Kenya's constitution. Public participation is embedded not merely as a process, but as a principle. Article 10 lists participation of the people among the national values and principles of governance, binding on all state organs and public officers whenever they make or implement public policy decisions. You see, the Constitution recognizes a simple truth. Government power is not self-justifying. It must be exercised with the consent and involvement of the people. Public participation exists precisely to prevent governance from collapsing into a small circle of decision makers who believe they know better than everybody else. It redistributes power outward, away from boardrooms and cabinet tables, back to the citizens whose lives are shaped by those very decisions. Now, it's not always neat, and it's not always comfortable, but democracy rarely is. And if those in power find the Constitution an inconvenient guide, perhaps they might turn to something they like to invoke far more often: spiritual wisdom. The Desiderata offers a simple reminder: listen to others, even the dull and the ignorant. They too have their story. Because in a democracy, the people are not an obstacle to governance. They are the reason for it. That's my take tonight.
I pick a bone with Kenya's political class. I will not call them the elites, because their conduct as we head towards the polls does not deserve that title. Every single week, we are treated to scenes of political violence and intolerance across the country. Young men and women are kept on standby, not for employment, not for innovation, but for deployment. Deployment into chaos, intimidation, and violence. On this platform, I have previously called out the Ministry of Interior and the National Police Service for what appears to be inaction. Tonight, I want to shift the spotlight. This responsibility rests squarely at the doorstep of the political class. All of them, elected leaders, aspiring leaders, and those in office. But let's us deal with the facts here. Unemployment in Kenya remains a serious challenge. According to the International Labour Organization, their 2024 estimates indicate that Kenya's unemployment rate stands at about 5.4%. That figure represents thousands of able-bodied young men and women actively searching for work and finding none. In urban areas, unemployment is estimated to hover around 15%, while in rural Kenya, it ranges between 4 and 5%. Behind these percentages are real people, frustrated, idle, and vulnerable to exploitation. And now, here's the real issue. This pool of unemployed youths is being weaponized as the 2027 general election fever gathers momentum. While this is not new, the scale, the coordination, and the brazenness are. There is now a structured market for political violence. There are official rates set for heckling, disruption, and for physical confrontation. The uglier it is at a rally, the costlier it earns in towns and villages. This is no longer a ticking time bomb. It has detonated, and someone within the political class appears to be thriving in this smoke. More disturbing is the sophistication behind it. These mercenaries of democracy are carefully disguised as they accompany elected officials to political events. Their role is introduced as security or bouncers. But if you scratch beneath the surface, many are drawing salaries funded by you, the taxpayer. Some operate under titles like county enforcement officers, casuals within the National Government Constituency Development Fund operations. They sit on official payrolls and are well accounted for. Others are absorbed into youth groups benefiting from the national and county government-funded programs or donor-funded initiatives such as financing locally led climate action, popular as FLOCA. During the week, these young men and women pose as environmental workers, clearing drains, planting trees, sweeping markets, you name it. But as the week eases to the weekend, their tool of trade changes. The rakes, the slashes, the spades, and the brooms disappear. Out comes the rungus, the pangas, and all manner of crude weapons. The perfect setting to breed and sell fear. The tactics is simple. Mask the money trail, finance them indirectly, and create plausible deniability. Political competition in this country should never mutate into organized intimidation. Campaigns are meant to be marketplace of ideas, not battlegrounds engineered by thin-skinned operatives who cannot win arguments without force. We must call these out collectively and unapologetically. Those orchestrating this violence are not strangers. They're amongst us and are custodians of our public funds. We must demand accountability and insist on political fair play. We, the citizens, have a right to assemble, debate, and choose free from fear. Elective leadership cannot be built on intimidation. just like democracy cannot survive on hired violence. Let the people decide, not goons, fear or coercion. That is my bond tonight.
Sasa tumechoka na Ruto. Yaani tumechoka. Motherfucker. Kama ni Ruto tutaki president wake bana. Hakuna kazi. Yaani tunakula msoto. Tunakula msoto. Sasa kwa nini tuwe na rais kama wewe? Mimi nimesema kama hizi salamu zikufikie bwana rais, tumechoka na wewe.